So another set of skills to counteract this and to challenge this is the practice of inquiry. Inquiry. And we want to be very specific in intergroup dialogue as facilitators. What sort of inquiry are we promoting? What sort of inquiry are we avoiding? Let's talk first about what we are avoiding, or what kind of inquiry we want to do in contrast to, okay? The first one that we want to identify is interrogation. Inquiry can exist as interrogation. You, as a participant, are sharing your experience with me, and I am going to put you on the defense about your experience. Because your experience is different than mine, you have the responsibility of proving the validity of your experience to me. I am going to question you until I am satisfied with the answer. Your experience is only valid or useful when I, as the listener, says it has been useful to me, or it's valid to me now. I'm ready to believe it or accept it. Okay? That's interrogation. And as an inquiry tool, it's inappropriate for dialogue. And as a facilitator, we can't participate in this, and we can't allow the participants to participate in this. Okay? The other form of inquiry that we want to avoid is making people the subject of curiosity. We can call this the museum effect. We don't want to create a dialogue that makes the experiences of our participants, or some participants, museum artifacts. Something that we're coming every week to learn from, to experience, to dispassionately examine and learn from. That's interesting. That's different than how I grew up. That's a curious thing. That's not the way we fall in love. Well, that's really interesting. I thought everyone who works hard and works long hours gets paid a lot. That's how it works for my parents. So you take a dispassionate or disconnected objective curiosity to the experiences of the other person. It's not connected, okay? What's particularly, it's not as mean-spirited as interrogation, but what's dangerous about this is it others the participants that you're communicating with. It makes them feel like they are less than normal. They're other than normal. Your experience you have considered or defined as the normal, the accepted, the understood, and anything that's different than that is subject to my curiosity. It has to be explained because it's foreign, it's unusual, it's different, right? So if we're not practicing these forms of inquiry, then what are we going to practice? What do we suggest? Many of you will have heard the term appreciative inquiry, and affirming inquiry is a methodology that we have adapted or translated from appreciative inquiry to a form of inquiry for intergroup dialogue, affirming inquiry. So we're going to take a moment and talk about four pillars or four key concepts for affirming inquiry. The first one is shared or mutual risk-taking or vulnerability. For it to be affirming inquiry, all of the parties, both A and T, have to experience the dialogue as mutual and shared risk-taking. I'm not going to be any more exposed in the dialogue than the other participants. The vulnerability that we're asking for is shared and mutual. I'm not going to challenge you and refuse to be challenged. We share that risk-taking and that vulnerability. The second one is very similar. And that's shared and mutual responsibility for contribution. In dialogue, we often say intergroup dialogue is a participatory sport. It's a contact sport. No one gets to be the passive observer. No one gets to sit on the sideline and play, just going to watch the game unfold. Everyone is involved. Everyone carries a shared or mutual responsibility for the contribution to the learning environment. We're not going to let there be asymmetric contribution, either by an individual or set of individuals or by groupings of individuals. Everyone has to share in the responsibility for their contributions to the dialogue, right? And that contribution, again, shows up sometimes as risk-taking and vulnerability, right? But, again, no one group, no individual carries more weight or responsibility for the contributions. The third one is also equally important as the first two, but much harder to measure for. And that, again, is shared and mutual benefit. For intergroup dialogue and for affirming inquiry to be good practice, neither group can benefit disproportionately. The dialogue doesn't exist to educate the agent group. The dialogue doesn't exist just to empower the target group. Those are good goals, but both groups have to share mutually in the benefits of the dialogue. That's affirming inquiry. When the inquiry leaves both parties feeling like I've benefited from what's occurred here, then that's affirming inquiry. The fourth one is probably the most important, but maybe the most challenging also. So the fourth one means that my need and or desire to know or learn or experience must be subjugated to the agency of others to answer my inquiries. This can represent the greatest challenge for a facilitator and for participants to learn and to practice. Because largely, our motivations for being in the room in a dialogue is because we have a strong desire or need to learn from others. We're there because we're interested in hearing from other people. But we have to understand that because of the power dynamic that already exists in the room, I can't allow my need or desire to know and to learn and to experience to be more important than the agency of others to answer my questions. Because of the asymmetric way that power exists, my need or desire to know, as expressed in my inquiry, could come off as a set of demands from other people to share with me. I want to know, so you have the responsibility of telling me. I have a desire or a need to know, and I can't be satisfied unless you answer me. that's not going to produce the sort of affirming inquiry and dialogue that we want to have in our rooms. How this exists is when I first recognize you have a valid reason to either answer or not answer me, no matter what my inquiry is. My inquiry is less important than your agency to decide. In practice, that can be as simple as just asking permission. Before I hit you with a question for the 14th time in a day, possibly, I ask you, are you comfortable with me asking you a question about what you just shared? I'm really happy to talk about my experience, but I wonder if you'd be willing to share something about your own experience. I can remember having one of our students talk about someone asking her about her head covering, her hijab. And she said, that day I just felt like saying, couldn't you just Google it? Why do you have to ask me? Don't you know anyone else who wears a hijab? Or couldn't you just go to your computer and Google it? Do you have to make me responsible for educating you about that? And she said she answered it, right? But sometimes the weight of all that inquiry can be itself oppressive. So we have to respect number 4 in affirming inquiry.